Goeiemôre almal in Duet, almal wat by die Duet online bediening inskakel vanoggend vir ons diens. Dis my voorreg om saam met Simon, hy's 'n goeie vriend van my, vanoggend saam met dat ek kuier vir 2 weke oor 'n tema met die naam Wat is die waarheid? What is the truth? Nou vanoggend Simon is Engels. Ek het hom getoets, hy eet biltong, hy eet droewol. I'm just joking.
Ek het 'n Afrikaanse vrou.
He's married to Afrikaans women.
Yes.
And I play in Potchefstroom.
I live in Potch, yes.
So hy's okay. Maar ons gaan so tussen die Afrikaans en die Engels spring vanoggend ook in die woord om sommer net te deel met julle oor wat sê die woord is die waarheid. En die rede is Simon hoekom ons praat hieroor vanoggend en ons saam kuier, of miskien moet ek eerder net begin met hierdie. Simon en Nel, sy vrou, het hulle eie bediening met die naam Rassie. Julle kan die bediening gaan uitkyk op die internet. Hulle is ook gebaseer in Potchefstroom, maar hulle het chapters van hierdie bediening reg oor die land. En as jy nie weet wat apologie is nie, apologetics, dit is die bediening wat in my definition, you're going to probably laugh at me.
No, that's fine.
Dis waar jy debatteer.
Yes.
You're debating the truth. Miskien het julle al hierdie video's gesien op die internet waar mense debatteer oor verskillende issues, Christene wat debatteer met ateïste ensovoorts, waar kom die wêreld vandaan, is Jesus regtig die seun van God, wat is die waarheid, is die Bybel regtig die woord van God, al hierdie tipe sake. Nou die rede hoekom ek vir Simon gevra het om saam met my hierdie diens te doen vanoggend is, ons lewe nie net in die lockdown tyd, in COVID-19 nie, maar in die tyd waarin ons leef in die wêreld, het ons antwoorde nodig. Ja. En baie keer is ons as Christene nie geskool in dit wat die woord sê. Die basic dinge van dit wat die woord oor ons geloof sê, kan ons as gelowiges nie eers met mekaar uit die woord uitpraat nie. En hier is die probleem met hierdie tema, dis hoekom ons moet gesels. Ek lees vir julle sommer in Engels, Ephesians 4:14, Ephesians 4 praat oor die fivefold gifting wat die Here vir die kerk gegee het, en dan sê hy dat hierdie gifting met die kerk bedien, sodat hulle die volgende kan beleef, dat hulle kan volwasse word. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Met ander woorde, almal weet in hierdie tyd, almal sit op die internet, Bittermin Kerk het oopgemaak, en so jy kan enige teaching op die internet kyk, en enige ou wat oortuigend kan praat, kan waarskynlik vir iemand wat nie goed vasgelê in die waarheid van die woord, so 'n bietjie rondplik in wat die waarheid is. So ons tema vir oggend is waarheid en ons gaan so tussen mekaar gesels en ek gaan so nou en dan dalk 'n duiwelse advokaat speel of miskien, 'n hemelse advokaat speel vanoggend. Om regtig seker te maak dat nie net julle wat kyk hierna nie, maar dat gelowiges sal leer dat dit wat die waarheid in die woord van God is, dit wat die Here vir ons gee, dat ek en jy geskool moet wees, dit moet ons fondasie wees. Dat ons nie rondgeslinger word in hierdie tyd deur nie net verskillende leringe nie, maar ook as ons kyk met ons oë wat rondom ons gebeur nie. Ons moet standvastig wees. Simon, ek glo dat die Here die kerk in die wêreld geroep het, nie net vir hierdie tyd nie, maar om in tye soos hierdie juis iets te wees wat na vore tree.
Yeah.
That provides an answer for a time when nobody has answers.
Yes.
So, kom ons begin vanoggend. Ek lees saam met jou. As jy jou foon by jou het of jy het jou Bybel, jy is so welkom, dan kan jy saam met blaai. Hier is 'n interessante skrifgedeelte in Johannes 18, wat ek gou saam met jou wil lees. Dit het hierdie debat, of hierdie gesprek tussen my en Simon ook begin. Johannes 18 vers 37. Is jy nog, dis waar Jesus saam met Pilatus staan, reg voor hy gekruisig word. Is jy dan nog tog 'n koning, het Pilatus gevra. Jesus antwoord hom, U sê dat ek 'n koning is, hiervoor is ek gebore en hiervoor het ek na die wêreld gekom, om oor die waarheid te getuig. Elkeen wie se bestaan in die waarheid gegrond is, luister na my stem. Pilatus sê toe vir hom, wat is die waarheid? En dis die vraag wat ons vra vanoggend, Simon. In die tyd waarin ons leef, is daar verskillende kerke, verskillende leringe, verskillende doctrines. Ons het die internet, social media wat ons vol inligting pomp. En dan het ons vrae soos, is ons geloof die enigste waarheid? En ek weet julle wil baie graag daaroor hoor, en ons gaan in 2 weke se tyd sal ons daai adresseer. Maar die issue hier is, as ons nie weet wat die waarheid is nie, hoe bly ons as gelowiges staande? En dan in respons hieroor, net 'n paar hoofstukke voor dit, sê Jesus in Johannes 14 vers 6, Jesus sê vir hom, ek is die weg en die waarheid en die lewe. Niemand kom na die Vader behalwe deur my nie. En so dis hier waar ons gesprek begin. Hierdie is 'n baie bold claim. Jesus sê hy is die waarheid en die weg, die enigste way to the Father. So that, as we've spoken, Simon, this is either a divine bold moment or it's not true.
Or it's not true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we speak about what is the truth and how do we deal with truth, can you help us with the working definition of truth based on what we've read here this morning?
Okay, so I think that this is perhaps the primary question confronting civilization at the moment. We live in an age, as you said, where we are inundated with a glut of information, of philosophies, ideas of all kinds, political ideas, world religions and their very varieties of ideas there, making demands on the lives of people, all claiming to be the way, okay? And Christianity is no different. It's competing as well in this massive conversation, which is more intense than ever before. Certainly, when I was a little boy growing up, there wasn't this kind of demand placed on the lives of myself in comparison to, say, for example, the students we work with at the university. And I think that these passages are very important because they tighten everything down for us. Pilate sums it up very simply. What is truth? The irony is that he had the embodiment of truth standing right in front of him. An opportunity, I would say, is missed. And then, of course, we find Jesus earlier in the book of John making these radical claims about himself. And this is, Jesus sets himself up on a collision course with every person for a number of reasons. Of course, he's an amazing individual in terms of character and virtue. Everybody believes that. Everybody knows that about Jesus. Everybody wants Jesus on the team because he's a righteous man, okay? All the religions like him, you know. The Muslims honor him. The Hindus would happily welcome him into their hierarchy of gurus and whatever. And even the secular people acknowledge that this. But the thing is, it's a problem because Jesus, as a righteous man, makes these radical claims. And this is one of the most radical. I am the truth. He's not just saying, oh, these things are true. He says, I am the truth. I am the way and the life. And this is the reason why this statement by Jesus in John 14 is so controversial, is because in an age of political correctness, with everybody making competing claims, there is this notion that all ideas and all claims are equal. And so Christians will get assaulted with, well, who are you to say that what you believe is really true? You know, and why should I believe that? And so we live in a culture today where what people think about truth now is different. And that's why that question is often coming up in the minds of people. I work at the universities, as you said, in the ministry, Rassie, Christi, and many of our conversations with students from all different backgrounds, including Christian students, are wrestling with this question over, well, why should we think that Christianity has it going on and everything else is false?
It's wrong. Yeah.
It's wrong, you know. You're so narrow-minded, you know. You've never got an education. You need to go and get an education. You haven't read any philosophy.
You're not qualified.
You're not qualified.
To say what is the truth.
You don't know what you're actually saying there because you're assuming something about truth, okay? And this is why the question that Pilate asked Jesus is so short and succinct. It frames the conversation that we're going to have this morning for the benefit of all the congregants here. Because we need to ask ourselves that question, what is truth? Christians are told we need to be bearers of the truth. We need to proclaim the truth. And of course, in an age of skepticism and competing ideas, people are going to ask you, you know, same question, what is truth? What do you mean by that? And what they want then, and what they're looking for, is some kind of definition for what we mean when we say Jesus is the truth. We believe that Jesus is the truth, but what do we mean by that? Okay, and so we're looking for a definition here. And this is very important now, and sometimes it's going to seem so obvious to you so as to be some kind of silly. I mean, I think a lot of the believers in this church will go, well, yeah, that's exactly the case. But we need to be careful now of thinking that that's how other people think about these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've got to be careful and slowing down and thinking, just because I have these convictions and I'm pretty sure that this is how it is, don't assume that other people around you think the same way. So it's not necessarily something for your own sake, it's for the sake of others, that you want to allow yourself a bit of room to think and put yourself in their shoes. Listen to what they're saying, okay? And so let's drill down into this question over what is a definition of truth, okay? Because if we're going to say, well, we believe in the truth, we want to know what we're talking about. If we don't, what we're going to do is we're going to end up passing like each other, ships in the night.
Absolutely, yeah.
In philosophy, we call it a fallacy of equivocation. We're going to equivocate. You're going to be talking about something, and what you think is the case in your mind, even though you're using the same term as the other person, they've got a different concept in their mind.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we want to define our terms. Okay, what is truth? So in philosophy, which is part of my training, philosophers will sometimes talk about theories of truth. And there are three major competing theories of truth, okay? There is those who believe that truth is just whatever works. It's called a pragmatic theory of truth. That theory of truth is dominant, okay, in many of the universities in this country, and I would argue all over the world. And it usually comes out of and is associated with the postmodern philosophy tradition. If you don't know anything about a philosophy, that's fine. But you need to know that universities are very significant in terms of shaping culture, because it's where ideas are bred and cultivated.
And the church should actually do the very same thing.
Exactly, yes. In fact, historically, it was the church that birthed the modern university.
Yeah.
So we've allowed a lot of the secularists to appropriate the institution which, for the most part, the church in the West founded. That's just a historical fact.
Yeah.
And I know my secular friends don't like to hear that, but they just need to go and do a bit of history there. Many of the great universities were started and founded by Christians, and they began usually as a theological program. That's why if you look at the insignias of a lot of the great universities of the world, Oxford and these included, you'll see there's usually a Bible with a verse or something.
Yeah.
They don't believe that anymore, but the architecture doesn't lie. The history doesn't lie. So there's a rich history of thinking about ideas within the Christian tradition, and we need to become mindful of that because we have something to say to the culture. But let's get back to this philosophy now, because the reason why people would say certain things about truth is because whether they've actually understood the philosophy, or maybe, like most people, they've absorbed a particular view of the world, which is usually a function of what these philosophers have said in these universities. And it spills over into other departments, and then it washes itself out in the culture through the media, through the arts, performing arts, visual arts, because the same ideas about truth will then begin to influence your ethics and your and this as well. But a lot of these issues and ideas begin in the philosophy departments, and then it kind of spills into the other departments. And so when you're around today and speaking to people, they will say things like, for example, truth is just whatever works, as a pragmatic view of truth. So that's one theory of truth. Another theory of truth would be a coherence theory of truth. That is that truth is whatever coheres. So if I make one statement here, I need to make sure that if I make another statement, that those statements are coherent with one another. If you're going to believe something, then you need to have a system of belief in which things are coherent. Okay, so those are two theories of truth. Now, it's my contention that both of those theories of truth have problems with them. Okay, sometimes something is true because it works. But a pragmatic theory of truth also fails in many instances. Same with a coherence theory of truth. You can have a coherent set of beliefs, but of course the question I want to ask you is, coherent with respect to what? You can have a great story. I don't know, let's take one for example, Lord of the Rings. It's a great story, and it's internally consistent and coherent within itself, but does it connect with reality? Does it apply with reality? And this is important now, because I think some people think that that's what Christianity is. It's just an amazing story. It's internally coherent, but one can't ask, well, is it true? What I mean by that is I'm asking, well, is that story connected with reality? Now, many philosophers say, well, you can't ask that question. You're not entitled to ask that question. Okay, and I'm going to argue contrary to that. I'm going to say no, absolutely true, because my definition of truth is what is called a correspondence view of truth, and this view of truth has been held for centuries by the church, and I think it's the view of truth which the Bible assumes. Let me give you an example. If you look in Romans chapter 1, when God is talking about the creation, he doesn't begin with saying things, well, everybody has their own perspective. What's true for you is true for you. He just says there, everybody encounters the creation and understands it. Psalm 19 talks about the heavens declare the glory of God. Day after day, it pours forth speech and knowledge, and it's heard. The Bible doesn't entertain skepticism about reality.
Yeah.
The truth about reality is knowable. And many of our philosophies deny that. And as a result of that denial, which happens in academic circles, that then spills over into the other departments and cashes itself out in the media, in other ways in which people then begin to think along those lines.
But Simon, isn't it true that it's also, that's a disease in the church as well? Many people believe that you can't really know the truth. It's out there, it's fluffy, and don't try and understand what it is.
Yes.
But that leaves the church and Christianity at a difficult place, because you can't argue,
Yes.
you can't put facts down,
Yes.
and so in the end you're silenced.
Yes, and this might work for you if you were a believer of another religious tradition, because they're pretty comfortable with that arrangement.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not the case with the Christian faith. And you're right. The church, unfortunately, has been profoundly affected by these philosophies, coming for the most part out of Europe. And instead of rejecting the philosophy, as a good Christian apologist would do, we've actually absorbed them. And so we've now begun to shape our Christian theology in line and in cooperation with these philosophies, which are ultimately deleterious to the Christian faith. Because if you buy into a philosophy which says, well, Christianity is true, but it's just true for me. What's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true. That's a popular slogan,
Absolutely,
which is connected to this philosophy, okay? And a lot of Christians subscribe to this. What do you do with Jesus' statement here? Because Jesus in John 14:6 is not suggesting that. He makes this very exclusive, absolute claim. And these kinds of philosophies reject absolute truth. Okay, they hold to, when philosophy they hold to a view of truth which is called perspectivism. Everybody has their own perspective.
Yeah.
And of course, if that's the case, then they can say, well, all religions out there are basically the same, and that's what they do say. Okay, but the problem is Jesus is not saying that here. He's making a very strong claim here. Okay. And I think that he is assuming a correspondence theory of truth. And when he says that I am the way, the truth, and the life, what he's suggesting there is that there is no other way to the Father except through him. Okay? And if we begin to examine truth, okay, and if our definition of truth is a correspondence theory of truth, which is the case, that truth corresponds with reality, okay, then we can begin to now think about the culture in which we find ourselves and begin to develop responses to people who might come in and on a kind of a basic level, okay, a more superficial level, say these kinds of things that we hear in popular conversation. But then also, in my situation, I have to prepare myself for the debate at the universities, where it gets a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't debate it.
Yeah. well, look, I like what C.S. Lewis said about philosophy. Philosophy must exist if for no other reason, because bad philosophy has to be dispatched with.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, much of what's driving our culture is bad philosophy.
Yeah.
Colossians 2:8 says it warns us against philosophy, but it doesn't say don't do philosophy. It says a philosophy that's contrary to the principles of Christ.
Absolutely.
So there is a philosophy here. Because, of course, a discussion over the nature of truth is a philosophical discussion.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so we need to do good philosophy, okay,
Based on the truth and the principles of
and
the
how
Bible.
it connects with this, yeah. And
So I have a question for
Yes.
you regarding everybody's own perspective.
Yes.
So the conversation that we had earlier was that it's a good thing, it's a good principle to question stuff that
Yes.
you read, that you hear about, that shows that people are thinking about whatever the input that they have. Jy weet, so dis goed om vrae te vra. Dis 'n teken dat iemand wil inligting hê, maar dis ook 'n teken dat iemand bietjie dink. Dis nie net ek ontvang dit, but I just accept it. I measure. So my question to you in regards to different perspectives
Yes.
and how this might work is, I think if we look at this marker from this side, it's round.
Yes.
If you look at it from the other side, it looks more
Yes.
square, but it's still the same marker.
Yes.
So how do we build our truth on what the Bible tells us, and how does that allow us to look at the same thing at different perspectives? Can you give us an idea?
Okay.
Not to tell people, listen, one guide will give you the teaching, but you just have to accept it. Moenie worry oor wat jy hoor nie, aanvaar net. Ons wil jy sê iemand moet dink, moet volwasse word. Ons wil jy sê iemand moenie rondgeslinger word deur verskillende waarhede nie en nie weet waar homself bevind nie. So how do we deal with that?
Well, I think one way we can do that, and this is that example you've given me is a way in which a lot of philosophy is taught at the universities, and unfortunately, I just think it's bad philosophy. To be honest,
it's a good example. It's bad philosophy.
It's a good example. Well, that's how they do this, and this conversation goes back to a guy called René Descartes, who thought that we ought to start our philosophy on skeptical premises. That is, his approach is called methodological doubt. You have to assume that maybe I'm being deceived by these things, okay? Because my sensory faculties deceive me. Well, I just think that's false. Your sensory faculties don't deceive you. Your eyes aren't out to deceive you.
Yeah.
Okay. The error is made in judgment. Okay. Your sensory faculties are just finite. So sometimes when you walk in the grass and you say, oh, darling, I see the hose pipe is over there. You walk up to grab the hose pipe and suddenly the hose pipe moves. You realize, actually, that's not the hose pipe, that's a mamba, okay? Yeah. But my eyes haven't deceived me. My eyes are just limited. If I had the eyes of a secretary bird, I would have seen that thing is a snake.
Yeah.
My eye base is only this far apart, which gives me limited perspective in terms of three dimensions at a distance. And so, but this approach to philosophy has just been assumed by the academy. And it's the result of a skeptical philosophy which undergirds a lot of the stuff in our culture. Yeah. And so the skepticism is always there. Okay. Yeah. So the church, unfortunately, has bought into a lot of that philosophy, and then it tries to avoid the skepticism by stacking its Christian theology on top of this, and it reduces all of the Christian faith to just about emotions. So they kind of want to steer away from having these kinds of conversations about truth and facts, because it's all about my own personal feelings. Yeah. The problem is Jesus is making this kind of statement.
Let's get to that.
The problem is that the truth of Christianity is grounded in an event. Okay? Christianity is not a way of life. Okay? Fundamentally. It's not like in Buddhism you've got to learn these particular mantras and you've got to go speak to a guru. Okay?
Yeah.
That's other religions. The truth of Christianity is grounded in an event. It's called the death and resurrection of Jesus. Okay? And it's that event around which everything turns. Okay? Now there's a way of life that comes because of that. Yeah. But it's a historical fact in the same way that Caesar crossed the Rubicon, or Augustine wrote The City of God in Carthage, or Genghis Khan and the Mongols invaded this part of the world, or Abraham Lincoln was the president of America, or Nelson Mandela was on Robben Island for so many years and then he became the president. Those are historical facts. And in the church, we have lightened the significance of talking about the historicity of Jesus as a historical person. We tend to consider the results of his work and focus on that in terms of its personal implications, which is important because it is about a personal relationship with Christ. And being convicted of your sin is very much a subjective thing. But Christianity doesn't just make that claim on your individual soul. Jesus is making claims about being true with respect to everything. Why? Because we know from other passages that he is Lord of creation. Yeah. Okay. So all authority is given to him. He is the creator. He is Lord of the Sabbath. He is the judge. He is the great designer. He is
great bridegroom. Everything.
He is everything. Okay. So what we want to end up doing here is we want to have a Christian faith that at some level is trying to engage all of reality. Yeah. And so what's happened in the church as a result of these philosophies is we've ended up compartmentalizing our faith. So we do Christianity in this little silo, and then we think that, well, my Christian truth applies here, but when I get back to work on Monday, then that's another domain, and that
this truth doesn't apply.
It doesn't really apply there. Okay. And this is a false way of viewing the world and it's not commensurate with the Christian faith.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just want to not wrap this up. I want to conclude on what we're saying just for this section.
Yes.
Dit is so belangrik want wat ons eintlik hier vir mekaar sê is Jesus wat hierdie claim maak dat hy die weg en die waarheid is nie net 'n claim wat tot ons toepassing van ons geestelike of Christelike lewe by die kerk is of die manier hoe ek hom ervaar nie. As ek jou reg hoor en ons lees hierdie skrif reg, dan sê Jesus hy is die waarheid. En dit beteken dat daai lewe as gevolg van daai claim kan nie net wees, hoorie maar, okay goed, jy kan glo wat jy wil, ek glo wat ek wil nie. Dis eintlik 'n toepassing wat ek my hele lewe moet hê. I have to apply that truth that he is the truth and the way and the life. And then we will speak about believing that later on. But so my question to you is, Simon, how do we deal with that every day? So we work in workplaces where not everybody believes what we believe. We have in our family members, maybe in our friendships, not everybody believe what we believe. And so we usually get to those debates around the fire or at work that, no, but that's what you believe. No. How do we live this truth?
Okay, that's a great question now. So here's how it's going to cash itself out for many people in a practical way. So you're having a braai there, and you're around some of your friends, and they're skeptics, okay? Or they're burnt Christians, and there's many of those in South Africa, or whatever there are. And so for them, it's very convenient to say, well, you've got your Christian thing, but that's your thing, it doesn't have bearing on. Unfortunately, that's not how truth works, okay? Because truth kind of imperializes over everything, okay? And if you actually begin to examine their philosophy, you'll begin to see that things fall apart for them very quickly. They want truth to be like this insofar as it deals with it's religious question, okay? So you can have your faith, it doesn't have any bearing on me. But if that's what is true about truth, if that's what their philosophy is, notice they don't apply that same philosophy to other spheres of their lives. Because if you say to them, well, that's interesting, so you believe when it comes to true claims in religion that it's just basically down to your subjective experience, but do you think it's the same with respect to your finances? Or how about your health? Okay? Because if you go to the doctor now and he says to you, Rassie, you are not feeling well now, this is serious, you've got stage 4 stomach cancer, okay? And you turn around and say to him, oh, that's just your truth. You're going to see how this philosophy falls flat in its face right out the gate.
Yeah.
Because when the doctor's speaking to you, he's not saying to you, well, oh, no, it's just down to your own opinion and your own choices.
Believe it or not.
No, believe it or not, that's just your thing, What he's saying, it's true for you that you have this condition. It's true for everybody at all times and in all places that on that day that you were diagnosed with this cancer, that you objectively have this cancer and you better deal with it. It's the same with your finances. If I show up at FNB and I go to the bank teller and I say to the lady behind the bank teller, look, ma'am, I'd like to draw 50,000 Rand from my bank account. She says, sorry, Mr. Brace, you only have 5 Rand in your bank account. How would she react if I turn around and say to him, well, that's just true for you. Give me 50,000. So what you can do now is you can begin to take this philosophy which they subscribe to and you can begin to apply it to their own lifestyle and you'll begin to see that the house of cards comes crashing down. Yeah. Okay? And it's not because you're being mean or nasty, it's because that's what the nature of truth is. Truth by definition is exclusive. So here's
it's absolute.
Absolutely, So and so on a practical level, you also have this kind of thing happening. People will say things that sound very impressive and very intellectual and highly thought through. When you think about it for a second, you realize it's actually just false. So people will say things like, oh, there is no absolute truth. Okay? And if you stop and you think about that for a moment, you'll realize that that statement is an absolute statement about the nature of truth. So they've kind of shot themselves in the foot. It sounds very impressive to young students at the university. They swallow this stuff up. And unfortunately, we haven't taught them how to respond. But this in philosophy is called a self-stultifying statement. Yeah. It's a self-defeating statement. Okay? To say that there is no absolute truth is to have made an absolute statement about truth.
Yeah.
So it kind of shoots itself in the foot. It's like saying, I can't speak a word of English. I've just spoken a word of English, kind of thing. And this is what's passed off at the university. I'll give you an example here. I'm not afraid to critique the universities here because I get to see the lives of young people destroyed on these places. But one of our students walked into a lecture hall, a big hall, one of these first-year classes. There's 400 students in the class on a big auditorium. And he walks in, and the first thing this professor says is, he said it like this, like Pilate, very succinct. He said to him, there is no absolute truth. And so one of our students held up his hand, and the professor motioned towards him and said to him, yeah, what's your question? And he said to him, sir, are you absolutely sure about that? Now, what that's pointing out is the self-defeating nature of this philosophy from this PhD guy who's just saying this. Now, all the students started laughing, and rightly so, because they realized the absurdity of his statement.
Yeah.
It's a self-defeating statement. Yet this philosophy is passed off in the universities everywhere. I don't care whether you go to UCT or UJ. It's the same in Europe. It's the same in America. I lived in Europe for 10 years. I lived in America. Now, this happens, interestingly enough, this is the crisis of the modern university. It happens in the social sciences. They traffic to a large extent in this postmodern philosophy, which has this view of truth. Now, if you go across to the hard sciences, and you're in the physics department and the electronics department, gates open or gates closed, or the engineering department or the maths department, they don't operate according to that philosophy. And so what's great at the university is this massive tension between these two major silos. Because the one's operating on a philosophy which doesn't believe in absolute truth, and the other one is going, hang on, either you have stage 4 stomach cancer or you don't.
Well,
it's not just down to your perspective. Either the gate is open or it's closed. It's not down to your perspective, your culture, your race, the color of your skin, what time you lived. There are absolute truths, you see. And what's fascinating is to get young Christians to start pushing these departments to have a conversation. So the question of truth is not just a crisis for Christians. It's a crisis for the culture at large. And as Christians, we're going to have to begin to push ourselves to begin to think a little bit more deeply about this.
Absolutely.
And if for no other reason, for the sake of the people out there who have bought into these bad ideas. 2 Corinthians 10:3-5 says we should take ideas captive.
Yeah.
And make them obedient to God.
Christ,
The warfare we fight in Christians is not physical force. We don't use power. We don't use force. We tear down bad ideas. And that's a battle of ideas, and it's related to the question of truth.
Yeah.
And for us as Christians, unfortunately, we're stuck with Jesus making these radical claims.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's point to that, and we head to the finish here.
Okay.
So what's very important, and what I hear today is, and that's very good news. We as Christians, as the church in the world, we don't have to submit to a theory or a philosophy or an idea that there isn't really an absolute truth. Or the truth is subjective,
Yes.
I can decide, or people can decide. Jesus makes this claim for us especially,
Yes.
to say that we are followers of Christ, and the claim that he makes has to lead us to a place where we has something to say, something to believe, and we have to act on that.
That's the critical thing, is act on it. This is the demand that Jesus is making here now.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying is not just true about himself, it's true about reality, it's true about philosophy.
And he is
He's the embodiment of all of those things.
Yeah.
And it's making a demand on your life. It's demanding action. It's demanding that you live in accordance with it.
Yeah.
It's a massive, massive claim. Okay?
So let's go there, because I'm very interested in that. Simon's got a scripture that he will read in the end as well. But I want to read this one.
Okay.
Is in John 17:17. Is ek gaan in Afrikaans lees. Hy sê Jesus bid vir sy disippels en dan sê hy heilig hulle deur die waarheid. Die truth.
Yes.
So what he's saying here when he's praying is he's appealing to God to cleanse and to guide and to lead Christians, the apostles at that time, with his truth.
Yes.
I'm thinking about Psalm 25:5,
Yes.
that where the writer says, please lead me and guide me with your truth. Now, we have to apply that. Jesus is the truth, and I think we can make lots of true statements. We can see, you can read for yourself. You can in die Bybel lees, wat is die waarheid? Oor die lewe, oor God,
Yeah.
oor Jesus, oor alles wat ons moet glo. But how do we take this to our everyday lives? How do we not live as Christians that's been tossed around to and fro with different ideas and different doctrines? How does someone's life look when they live with their feet on the ground, in the truth.
Yes. Well, he has, and I hate this about truth, but it's true about truth. Is
Absolutely.
The truth. The truth is a. We don't create truth. In fact, we don't create it. We discover it,
Yeah.
and sometimes we bash ourselves up against it,
Yeah.
and we lose every time. In fact, this is what lying is.
Yeah.
It's knowing what is true, and then your will suppresses it.
Yeah.
And we do this all the time.
Yeah.
And so when the truth does sanctify, because it makes a demand in our lives. It shows us up for being the liars that we sometimes are,
Yeah.
for the frauds that we sometimes are, for how fickle we are, for how shallow we are.
Yeah.
And nowhere is that more explicit in my estimation than, say, for example, Jesus, the greatest sermon ever preached, the Sermon on the Mount. Because everybody is held up there. Everybody is found wanting. In your own thoughts, Jesus says, if you hate people, this is what you like. And none of us likes that. None of us likes to be exposed for that. But Jesus exposes everybody on that front. He exposes all men. I don't care who you are. Muhammad is exposed. Okay? All the men who ever thought they were righteous were exposed by Jesus' words. And it's because it's true. It's because when he says that this is what's true about human beings in their condition, it corresponds with reality within ourselves. This is the process where people realize, hang on a sec now, man, I'm a sinner.
Yeah.
I really need to repent. Lord, help me. This is the moment of salvation. This is what we're now told to make light of these things. Because everybody's got their own truth over there and everybody's just okay. We live in this culture today. No, it isn't the case.
Yeah.
Jesus didn't say that. He said nothing like that. Jesus is a nice guy, okay? He's an amazing man, okay? But he's also Lord of the universe. He's the judge as well. He's the guy who went into the temple and drove out the people with a whip. He's the person who the same person who is going to deal with all of us, both those who have been wicked and those of us who've been not so wicked. Or those of us who have been full of pride and thinking, gee whiz, I'm not as bad as that guy.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus says, well, do you hate? Have you, in the case of adultery, and have you thought about a woman in this way? Yeah. Well, you're as good as the guys commit.
Yeah.
So we're all undone by that. But the question now is, how do we live now? Now the challenge comes is, if that's the case, am I going to live as a Christian in light of that truth?
Yeah.
Because I think we have this challenge in the scripture here, in that the problem is not that people don't know the truth, it's that they won't orientate their lives in accordance with it. Now, when you do that, you run the risk of destroying yourself. You're either going to choose to align yourself with the truth and follow him, okay, or you're going to decide, I don't want that, I know it's true, but now I'm going to live my own way. Well, fine, if you do that, that's exactly what happens in Romans 1. God's wrath in Romans 1 is passive. He hands people over to themselves.
Yeah.
If you want to become the God of your life, there you go.
Yeah.
And we see what happens in people's lives when they do that. Okay? You're not the author of creation. You don't know everything. You don't even know yourself that well, to be honest with you. God knows you better than yourself. And now you want to, imperialize over all of reality and think that you've got it going on. This is the arrogance and the pride of men.
Yeah.
And there are consequences for that. Either that, or you're going to follow the man who preached the Sermon on the Mount, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and you're going to bend your knee and submit to him and say, you know what, I think that what I'll do is I'm going to allow this man to lead my life, to lead my marriage, to lead the way I speak to people, to how I deal with my neighbor, to how I deal with my kids, to how I speak to people who don't share my convictions. That's the demand that's being made there.
That's awesome. I love that.
And it's making a demand on us, and it's difficult. The impossibility of Christianity is not, and the difficulty of Christianity is not salvation, because the Lord has done it for us. Okay, it's what happens following it. It's this process of sanctification, where we have to follow Jesus. That's what's difficult. In fact, it's impossible unless the Spirit is in us to help us, to enable us, because we are all weak. We are all fragile. We are all feeble,
And isn't that what John 17:17
yes.
Jesus prays? He says, sanctify them through your truth.
Yes.
So the life we live, because of what happened, because of the man Jesus, what we choose to do and how we align our lives with that is to be sanctified by the person of truth, and that's Jesus.
Yes.
And what I also hear you saying, but we've read it as well. Jesus says, I'm the way and the truth and the life. There's only one way.
Yes.
We're not left to our own perspective.
Yes.
We submit to his perspective, and that is truth.
Absolutely.
Read to us that scripture about Lazarus.
Okay, so yeah, we have this fascinating event. Lazarus is dead now. He's been dead for a while, actually. And of course, his family and close relatives are lamenting the situation. And Jesus shows up. We can go and read it. And then Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." You know. And then Martha's response is, Martha said to him, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Okay. And then Jesus says this to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Now, that's another crazy statement from Jesus. Okay? But if it's true, it's of magnificent import on our lives.
Yeah.
If Jesus was raised from the dead, everything changes.
Yeah.
Okay? If Jesus was raised from the dead, this world is different. If that's true, we need to really live our lives in accordance. But what is often missed here, and I confess I miss it as well, is what Jesus says at the end of this. Remember, he says to him, "And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." And then he says to Martha, "Do you believe this?" And I've been confronted with this myself. Do I believe this? Do I really believe these things that Jesus is saying about me, whether it's in the Sermon on the Mount, whether it's his politically incorrect statement in John 14:6, maybe the most politically incorrect statement that's ever been said in the history of mankind. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I mean, there's no more politically incorrect statement than to make that kind of claim. Yeah. Unless, of course, you can back it up, which is what Jesus does. I mean, that's what the Pharisees say to him in John 10. "You, a mere man, claim to be God." Yeah, that's what got him crucified. Yeah. The question is he more than a mere man? Yeah. Okay? Well, you can go and do a study on that. I have to do a preaching on this coming Sunday for another church on Jesus' use of the title Son of Man. Well, go and look at who the Son of Man is, Daniel chapter 7. And then you'll start to get scared. You'll start to get scared because you realize the Son of Man is going to be a significant individual. And Jesus appropriates that title for himself. Okay, this is why C.S. Lewis was correct. Jesus doesn't leave you room to just say, well, he's a good guru, he's a righteous man, because he makes these kind of radical claims.
Absolutely.
So there's no way, there's a watershed. It's like, either the water's going down to Gela or it's going down to the Vaal. It's not going both ways. It's either going that way or that way. Yeah. And Jesus is a watershed. You can't stand on it. You're either going this way or that way. With these kinds of radical claims that Jesus makes, he doesn't leave that option open to you. Yeah. And so that statement that he says to Martha, "Do you believe this?" That would be my challenge to the church and to the congregants, is to think carefully about these things. Because sometimes we become so familiar with it, we've kind of trivialized the significance of these things. Yeah. Do you really believe this? Do you really know and believe that Christianity is true, okay, even if you've lost your faith? Christianity is true even if there was only one Christian in the world. Yeah. Okay. The truth of Christianity is not contingent upon popular notions. It's not contingent upon philosophy. It's not contingent upon, how smart you are or whether you've got some, special religious ceremony. We're not a mysticism. It's not mysticism. Christianity, it offers a man crucified and resurrected from the dead. That's what happens in 1 Corinthians. It's the wisdom of God. It's foolishness to Greeks who want a philosophical system, and it's foolishness to the Jews because they wanted a conquering Messiah, and they got a crucified Messiah. They got a man put on a cross, and according to the Old Testament, people who are put on trees are cursed by God. Yeah. Well, they ought to have thought about that for a moment. Yeah. Okay? And this is the Jesus that we proclaim, the most controversial personality in all of civilization, the guy who says the most radical things, and we want to follow him. Do you believe this? Do I believe it? Do you believe it? Because if we do, it ought to fundamentally change the way we live. Yeah.
So that's the challenge, is asking yourself, do I really believe this? Het ek hierdie al gehoor? Of glo ek dit regtig? And I'm sorry to say, but James 2:14 says that. He says, Jy kan nie beweer dat jy glo, maar dat jou lewe nie daarvan getuig nie. Iemand wat werklik glo, se lewe
Yes.
wys dit.
Yes.
Dis nie dade om te ontvang nie. Dit wat jy genuine glo, sal deur jou lewe vloei, is sigbaar, nee.
Yes.
Ek wil afsluit vanoggend met hierdie skrifgedeelte, terwyl ons gesprek nog ver van klaar is en ons volgende week gaan aangaan. Ek wil weer herhaal wat in Efesiërs 4 staan. So sal ons almal tot geloofseenheid, tot die kennis van die Seun van God en tot volwassenheid kom en die volgroeide gestalte van die volheid van Christus bereik. Die doel hiervan is dat ons nie meer klein kindertjies sal wees nie, wat ronddobber en rondgeswaai word deur elke wind van lering, deur mense se slinksheid en se gekonkel waardeur hulle dwaling beplan nie. Maar dat ons eerder terwyl ons in liefde aan die waarheid vashou, in alle opsigte na hom sal groei. Hy, Christus, is die hoof. So we want to conclude today in this conversation, even though it's philosophical but also absolute, dat die waarheid is 'n persoon en dis Jesus.
Yeah.
En ons vraag vanoggend vir elke ou wat na hierdie boodskap kyk is, glo jy dit? Glo jy dit regtig? En die challenge hiervan is, hoe rig jy jou lewe en hoe belyn jy jou lewe met die waarheid, Jesus Christus? Hoekom is dit belangrik? Hierdie vers het net vir ons gesê. God se plan met elke gelowige, elke kerk vol mense, is dat daai gelowiges sal groei tot volwassenheid, om standvastig te wees. Die tyd waarin ek en jy nou leef, in lockdown, COVID-19, 'n tyd van jy moet polities korrek wees, anders gooi die spoeg die majority van mense jou uit, of die stelsel jou uit, is juist die tyd wanneer God gelowiges geroep het, volwasse te wees, standvastig te wees, in dit wat regtig die waarheid is. Mag jy baie geseënd wees. Ek gaan vir jou bid. Here, dankie dat ek en Simon in 'n gesprek kan tree oor Jesus Christus. Die waarheid. Here, en ons wil kom bid dat U ons as Christene sal ruggraat gee in hierdie tyd. Here, om nie rondgeslinger te word nie. Om nie ons ore uit te leen, Here, na allerlei praatjies nie. Here, bring ons fokus terug na wie U is, Here Jesus. En lei ons deur die waarheid. Reinig ons, sanctify us through the truth. Here, en help ons om as standvastig op te staan, vir wie ons is in U, vir wat ons glo. Here, en vir ons is dit die voorreg om U te dank, om te sê dat ons volg nie net 'n filosofie, ons volg nie net 'n idee nie, maar ons volg 'n persoon, Jesus Christus, wat ons lei deur sy waarheid. Ons bid dit in Jesus naam. Amen.
Amen.
Welkom tuis en mag jy baie geseënd wees.